There are people who say, absolutely, the government has these things. My good friend, Dr. Stephen Greer,
yes.
I'm very friendly with Steve and with his colleague, Professor Loader from the University of New Hampshire.
What happened there, by the way? When I interviewed
him... What happened with whom?
Stephen. He thought about a year ago, 2 years ago, he'd be coming out with an apparatus, and something happened.
I've been privy to some of this information. I keep confidential what I'm not particularly supposed to talk about.
I mean, he said he had an inventor. He said he had an inventor.
Yes, there is an inventor, and I understand that they are still having discussions with that particular inventor. I do not know precisely what that inventor has or has not. What the facts that have been told to me by Steve and his colleagues are quite impressive. But I haven't seen it myself, so I don't bless it whatsoever.
Right.
But I have also seen, I must tell you, some excellent work whereby Dr. Loader from the University of New Hampshire, who works with Dr. Greer, brought to our laboratory here at the New Energy Foundation in recent times, and we checked out a solid-state device. We're still doing some work on that. It was stated by the inventors that it was over unity. We have yet to see the over unity characteristic in it. Other labs are looking at it. We're going to look at it again. Until we see excess energy from it, neither Steve nor Loader nor myself nor anyone will bless it. On the other hand, there's absolutely no doubt that the devices, patented devices no less, by Dr. Paulo and Alexandra Correa in Canada are over unity. Okay, this is a clear case where vacuum energy can be seen in technically published information that is irrefutable as far as I'm concerned, and I have personally been at the lab and seen it. There's no doubt that these machines exist. Now, Steve would say that the government has much more advanced technology, which they've maybe learned from UFOs or something.
Right.
Maybe, but what good does it do us? Is it really doing us any good? No, obviously not. My general feeling about it is that the government does not have such things.
But you believe space energy is the prime energy. It's up there at the top.
Absolutely. Definitely extraterrestrial civilizations exist. I have almost zero doubt about that, essentially zero doubt. For all practical purposes, they exist. And in fact, more evidence of that comes from the ether itself, comes from the work of Wilhelm Reich in the following sense. Life probably originates very easily from the ether, okay, with the right conditions on Earth. Reich was among them, the people who were working on that, whereas our current model of life, the origin of life, is that it happened at one incidental point billions of years ago, and then it took a long, long time to get started. I don't believe that.
All right, stay with us. Fascinating. I'm George Norrie, back in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. Dr. Mallove, let's talk a little bit more then about energy category number 2, and that is zero-point energy, which we touched upon a bit, space energy. What is it? What's out there that does this?
Well, here we have to talk about, just name the fundamental theories on which mainstream physicists and chemists rely, okay, for the entire foundation of our scientific world, okay? And these theories are, at present, quantum mechanics, okay, and relativity, the special theory of relativity that changed everyone's perspective, starting around 1920 when Einstein began to become prominent. He had his theory of special relativity published in 1905, and later his general relativity theory, a theory of how so-called space-time is curved in 4 dimensions to give gravity and so forth. There are many reasons why he became very prominent, but we need not get into them, but obviously he did become prominent, and the theory of relativity is given a lot of credence, and it basically says, as we all know, E equals mc squared. That's a simple equation that everyone can understand, that mass times the speed of light squared is the equivalent amount of energy in matter, and we rely on that, generally speaking, for explaining nuclear reactions.
And there's a lot of energy that comes out of that.
Oh, absolutely. There's no doubt that nuclear reactions, both fission, gave us the atomic bomb, the fission bomb, and then thermonuclear fusion energy from the hydrogen bomb, and the attempts, of course, by the hot fusion community, the $20 billion attempt since 1950, to tame it and bring it down into large tokamak-type reactors. However, it turns out that after a long consideration by critics, and there have been many critics of special relativity, very sane people, not anti-Semites who were against Einstein because he was Jewish, okay, there were those.
I understand.
But, the Nazis called it Jewish science, for example. But people who were careful critics of relativity have not been listened to, okay, and have just been brushed aside because it was stated that the experiments all confirmed all aspects of relativity, special relativity, and there could be no doubt about it. A guy from Caltech said that, David Goodstein, the same man who said in recent times that he really had doubts about cold fusion, okay, so he doesn't know what he's talking about.
Right.
But it turns out that relativity is fundamentally flawed. It basically introduced the concept that there was no ether, okay, and it was true that there was no electromagnetic ether. This, the Michelson-Morley experiment and some other experiments, in my view, the view of others who I learned from, have proved that there was no ether whereby electromagnetic waves had to vibrate in space to produce what we see of light and so forth. But this threw out the possibility that there was another kind of ether, a mass-free plenum that did not operate on electromagnetic principles, that the Michelson-Morley experiment could never detect, okay? Wilhelm Reich, a brilliant man that he was, an unusual man, because remember, he did come out of a sexual psychiatric orientation, right? With
Yes.
Sigmund Freud. So who is some person like that to say anything about physics?
Right.
Well, in 1941, a brilliant fellow that he was, he brought some interesting observations to Einstein. He actually had 4.5 hours with Einstein. By the way, this meeting is virtually absent from all accounts of the biography of Einstein.
Why? Because of what happened to
Reich was later disparaged. He died in prison, remember?
Yeah, okay.
He was turned into, just like cold fusion, an insane pathological man.
Do you think Einstein took some ideas from him?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Einstein, he asked Professor Einstein, a colleague, of course, in the fight against fascism. Remember, this was early 1941, before the United States got into the war.
Right,
But, of course, both of them were opposed to the Nazis, obviously. And
well aware of what was
and well
going on.
aware of the possibility. So Einstein, to his credit, felt that all possibilities should be explored in the possible quest to find ways to deal with perhaps war technology and what have you. His letter later on to President Roosevelt obviously helped the Manhattan Project get going. But here was Reich showing him a simple experiment whereby a mercury thermometer, very accurate mercury thermometer, on the surface of what we call a Faraday cage, a steel enclosure, was higher and remained higher throughout the day than a similar mercury thermometer suspended in air. Okay, now this sounds, your listeners even who don't know about this may say, well, that sounds crazy. What could that possibly show? Well, careful experiments by Dr. Paulo and Alexandra Correa in Canada confirming this type of experiment, and in fact, giving it an even worse bias against being seen. In other words, not having the orgone accumulating layers of material around the Faraday cage, just using bare steel boxes, so to speak. In their laboratory, they have found persisting, round-the-clock, elevated temperatures on the metal Faraday cage, even in a darkened room. Now, when I first saw their ether motors and their PAGD, okay, I was obviously motivated to go back and study Reich.